Hey, what's up guys? Are you a beginner photographer looking to expand your lens collection, but you're not quite sure what to pick and you may not have that much money to spend? Well, in this video, I'm going to be going over 3 lenses that are at the $100 price point that may just be for you. Starting off, we got the Canon 50mm. Now, this is a pretty popular lens pick, and I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of it, but it is a 50mm focal length with an aperture of 1.8. It is great for portrait photography, low light photography, overall just general photography purposes, anything that you would imagine you could use a 50mm focal length for. Personally, I find myself using the 50mm lens a lot when I'm doing portrait photography, when I want to get headshots or a lot of close-up shots, maybe from chest up, and I want to get that subtle blurriness around the subject. You want to get that blur. It's great for that. And obviously, like I said, low light. If you're working indoors and you can't use a flash, then that's great too, because with the 1.8 aperture at $100 for this lens, keep that in mind, $100, 1.8 aperture, this is going to be a very good lens to pick up. You could just slap that lens on there and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about a flash, and you should be able to keep your ISO relatively lower. Moving on, we got the Canon EFS 24mm f2.8. So this lens is just going to be for crop sensors. Keep that in mind. If you don't have a crop sensor, then sadly you're going to have to skip over this one. This lens's aperture still goes down low enough to 2.8, so that still allows for a decent amount of light to come in, but the focal length of 24 doesn't really fit everyone's desire. So I would say 24mm would be good for, let's say, landscape photography, architecture photography, street photography, environmental photography. That could fit into like landscapes. Interior photography is a good one. So if you're an interior photographer and you want something that can really capture the whole room, then that's definitely a good pick for you. If you're a night sky or astrophotographer, stuff like that, that will pick up a lot more the focal length. And then group photos too. So if you need to pick up a big group of people, that focal length will work for that too. Another thing to mention about this lens is the motor. So it has an STM motor, which is great for videography. So the STM motor in this lens, compared to the other lenses I'm going to be mentioning, are USM. So the other lenses have the USM motor. This one has an STM motor, which is a very silent motor, and that benefits videography. That way you don't hear the motor humming in the background. With this one, it's going to be just very silent. So if you're a videographer, or maybe you want to experiment with videography in the future, this may be something you want to pick up. Now, moving on over to the Canon EF 75-300mm. It's completely in the opposite direction now. This lens only has an aperture going to 4 and 5.6. So in between those areas, depending on your focal length. So at the low end, if you're at 75, you're going to have 4. At the high end, you're going to have 5.6. This lens is, I wouldn't say it's a great lens, because it's known to have poor quality. If you do a quick Google search, a lot of people give mixed reviews on it, saying that it's not very sharp, which it isn't. It's not the sharpest lens you could get, but it's a good entry-level lens at the price point for getting into a telephoto lens. So if you're looking for a lens for telephoto photography, it's a great lens for that. Portrait photography still, if you want that compression, if you want to mess around with compression in your portrait photography, 300mm, anywhere between 75 to 300mm, that will allow for a lot of compression. You can mess around with that. See if that's something that you enjoy. Keep in mind, if you're a beginner and you want to experiment with these things, it's only $100. It will allow you to experiment with it and get an idea if this is something you really want to end up spending thousands of dollars on for a high quality lens. That way you could go down that path even further. Now again, you could also use this lens for nature and landscape photography. So if you want to, let's say, photograph wildlife, birds, stuff like that, this is a great lens to get into that as well. And then again, for a telephoto lens, it's budget friendly. You're looking at $100 for your first telephoto lens. Personally, I feel like you can't beat it. There are other options that are similar to the 75 to 300 millimeter that may be slightly sharper and within, I would say, $100 difference of it. So you can look up and do the pros and cons of it, but I would say go with this if you're strictly on a budget. It's a great lens. And with that being said, those are all the lenses I have within the $100 price point that I feel like are reasonable for a hobbyist. If you have any questions, feel free to comment your question. I will get to you as quick as I can. Leave a like if you liked the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.